And welcome everybody to the first meeting in June of our Unity Correspondence course, our seemingly endless trek through the prosperity lesson.
Right.
I was looking at the text this morning, and we still have a ways to go, but that's fine. The purpose is for us to share with each other and to have fellowship. And so if we get through it today, we do, and if we don't, we still have the fellowship. So let's settle in, and as always, we'll begin with our daily word, and I'm going to put it on the share screen here. And as soon as it shows up, maybe somebody would volunteer to read it out loud for us.
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go. Zeal. Divine zeal is my impulse to accomplish great things. Toward the end of his long life, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore famously wrote, I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. This story shows me that as a divine gift, zeal is always mine to call upon, no matter my age or the state of my life. It is the impulse that makes me eager to rise in the morning and gives me energy to get started on the day's task. It drives me to give the best of myself to those people and things I care about most. Zeal is quickening, enlivening energy that helps me feel the presence of God within and bring that presence to life in a way that only I can. I sizzle with zeal, with passion and enthusiasm. I live, love, and serve. And from Romans, do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord.
Wow, thanks, Lillian. Divine zeal is my impulse to accomplish great things. Let's affirm that together. Divine
Divine
zeal
zeal
is
is
my
my
impulse
impulse to
to accomplish
accomplish
great
great
things.
things.
Yeah. I remember the first time I heard that Charles Fillmore quote way back in my beginnings in Unity. It's like, I never heard anybody talk about sizzling with zeal before. It was great.
I have yet.
Okay. As so we let our zeal for sharing and learning stay kindled in each of us. We're going to pick up. We last week we ended with this long Charles Fillmore quote that Lillian, I believe you read for us. And love is one of those ideas which provides a key to the infinite storehouse of abundance. It opens up generosity in us. It opens up generosity in others when we begin to love and bless them. Will it also open a spirit of generosity in God? It certainly will and does. If you consciously love and bless God, you will soon find that things are coming your way. It will surprise you that just thinking about God will draw to you the things that you want and expect and bring many other blessings that you had not even thought about. Thousands of persons have proved this law to their entire satisfaction. This law will demonstrate itself for you and for anyone who uh, applies it faithfully, for love never faileth. And so we're picking up here on paragraph number 30 and 31 for this particular section. Who would be willing to read number 30?
I'll do it.
Janet will. I can do it.
Okay, we had somebody else. Kevin, was it you?
Yes.
All right,
Kevin,
Kevin
I'll
said
defer to
first, and
you.
then Janet, you could do 31, okay?
Okay, whatever.
Okay. Thanks, Kev.
Okay, no problem. 30. Money is not an evil in itself. It is the selfish use of money that makes trouble. Money is not a curse to those who see the place that it fills and keep it in its place. Money was made for man and did not money was made for man and not man for money. When they know that substance and not money is the source of their good, they will not be grasping and selfish. The term uncertain riches refers to the possession of things apart from the consciousness of one substance as the source of all. Uncertain possessions are the ones that cause vexation and sorrow. Probably
And then could
mispronounced
you
that.
read note number 6?
Number 6, uncertain riches. See Fillmore Study Bible commentary for First Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. True riches is having what we need when we need it. And the very knowing of this truth is also a source of great enrichment for our minds and souls. Our own spirit-led will charges and reminds us to be aware of settings our hopes on uncertain and temporary things, but that we should rather set our minds upon God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy.
Okay, great. Thanks. Comments on this paragraph or thoughts? Bless you.
Thank you.
Well, I can share from the annals of my life.
Okay.
To tell you and feel, I don't know, shame is too strong a word, and I do understand all of this psychologically because I certainly have pondered it over the years. But I grew up very poor, and it always felt like we were Catholic and they were not talking about manifesting anything or metaphysical anything. It was very Irish Catholic church going. So I had no help, I don't think. And I just felt, oh my God, if I can only find a rich husband when I grow up, I'm going to be okay. And I didn't understand anything about money not being the solution. Because I guess I'm told if you don't have it and life is really hard, you assume if you did have it, it wouldn't be so hard. And I did find the rich husband, and he was a very, very unwell person. And I paid a big price for being in his milieu of what you could do with money. And I saw the things dropping down one by one that I assumed if I had this, I would feel peace, I would feel calm, I would feel happy. And it took 20 years, but I walked away from it with nothing. I knew I would never fight him for 1 cent of their money and their whatever. And I just had to go. And my kids by then were in college, so we were able to. I wasn't toting along 2 little kids that I was trying to support. But it was after that that I really started to search for a spiritual solution to that wasted time and that sort of, I would say, insanity. But I've been told it isn't insanity, it's being a human being, and just it's just a thing. And it absolutely has dropped off over the years. And I give so little thought to money or to what I could do if I had it, or I don't even think about how much worse things would be if I didn't have any, but I just don't think about it. That took a long time and a lot of prayer. So that's my add-on.
You made me think that what we could have been taught when we were kids is not to find the rich husband, but to find the rich one substance.
Yeah, yeah. Or get an education. That might have been a good thing to be taught also, but it was
Well,
not in the cards.
Janet, that is a great story of evolution.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that the Sermon on the Mount, when it's misinterpreted, well, the Sermon on the Mount from Emmett Fox was enlightening for me because the whole thing about the meek inheriting the earth in the Bible kind of makes it sound like you need to be poor and your riches will be, stored upon the Lord when you get to heaven. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to use these words without too much thought, a conspiracy to keep, poor people poor and rich people rich. I know that's kind of harsh, but it does feel like that. And then when you learn that prosperity isn't only money and that money isn't evil and, it's okay to aspire to success and prosperity. That's an epiphany. That was an epiphany.
Well, and I wanted to share that my dad was the youngest of 10 siblings, and they didn't have shoes many times. And over the years, he ended up being a military man. So I was raised jumping around, but they always supplied a house, steady paycheck. And in his later years, we used to reminisce, of course. And during the reminiscing, he kept repeatedly for years saying, but we always had what we needed. And it was something that I think when I've reviewed some of this about what Kevin shared, the verse, First Timothy, that was true. Throughout my childhood, we always had a roof over our heads, whatever we needed in the moment. If we were moving to Michigan, then we got what we needed. And if we were moving to wherever, the next place was, it was something that my dad had a great amount of gratitude for. And I think of him and how he felt and how he was raising us. And it really helps me understand a lot of it, that because at the time as children, you expect to get what everybody else has. And while that didn't happen, it's interesting that now I am grateful for his influence to help me understand that level of always having what I need when I need it. And it may not necessarily be what I think I need. But he was definitely very grateful and always grateful for the military and what they were able to offer him. And so it's wonderful now to be in touch with cousins, and they talk about the hardships that their parents went through, and there was a few others that went in the military, but a lot of the women married and thought that things would work out, and 5 years later didn't. And so, out of 10 siblings, it's nice to be able to have contacts with my cousins to understand, like you said, Della, the evolution of what I learned in our family, and what I learned from, him and my cousin helps me understand some of the Bible verses.
Right.
Thank you, Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your father had an understanding of the substance as the source of all.
Very much so. He was definitely the spiritual influence in my life, and we were all raised Catholic, or I'm sorry, raised Methodist, and then I raised my family Methodist until put things together as later on as an adult and had teenagers. But it's having a little bit of that background, um, and being able in his later years, to go to church with him and get him to a church and understand how important that was to him. And it was a rock solid belief system, and he always had that gratitude. There was just an immense amount of gratitude, whether it was his job. Um, he was grateful when they sent him to Vietnam, and we got bounced around between housing because he was over there, and we could never understand it as children, but yet as an adult, I can put together the pieces better.
Sure. So I have a question for you if you're willing to share. What was how exactly did your dad manifest his gratitude? How did you know that he was grateful?
He was always very kind, very respectful. Um, Rarely did I see him have extreme anger, no outburst. His discipline was just a look. He could look at you and you would start crying and apologize and I'm sorry. So he didn't have to, lay a hand on us or anything. It just was a kindness, a sense of peace. There was definitely a a sense growing up that he was not just that way with us, but he was that way with everyone. There were people that he touched in his life that, especially after he retired and got involved in his church community, and we would visit, and they would come up to us, and they always would reiterate his kindness, his generosity when he could, because he retired very well and he was generous for years. And now, luckily, two of us, of his daughters, are able to do that with the people that he was trying to help. And so we stayed in their lives. And I had a best friend, kind of a surrogate mom locally, that he had been supporting, and he had known her over the years. And it it's like a steadiness of faith that I do look back on, that it wasn't just us as kids. He wasn't just providing for his family and doing a job. And he would tell us, especially in his later years, he would always remind us things, or he'd say things like, yeah, but you always had what you needed. My older sister went to like 4 or 5 different high schools. We got kind of jumbled between bases, and she had to go to multiple high schools. And if she complained about it, his comment back would be, "But you always had what you needed. If you needed a dress for the prom, you had your dress." It was that reminder, that kind reminder, not a guilt, not a shame thing, not at all. It was a kind reminder, which when you read the Bible verses, it just makes me think of him. And I get grateful for that influence in my life.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
that's a wonderful story. I love hearing about someone that has a good dad and how it's such a gift. And I would say, since I started here, I have often wondered what would my mother make of all this. I don't think she would understand substance, but she also had very strong faith and very much God is going to take care of us. It's God will provide. And it was true. It's just like you said, Sandy, like things just always worked out. And it is so it's so important for me to remember that what other people believe or how they live their life around their beliefs spiritually is really not important. It's all kind of goes up to the source of, that we're all under the care and protection of substance. And I get it. I like it.
Yeah, it's almost as if it doesn't matter whether your mom understood substance as a concept. I mean,
Yeah.
she just knew in her heart that she was being taken care of.
Yeah. I didn't know how poor we were until I tried to go to college. And then I had gotten a scholarship to a very fancy school and had the most, all the wrong clothes that had been, my mother made all clothes. And I was in the dorm, I would say 48 hours. And I thought, I can never do this. I cannot be around these girls. I don't fit in. I'm never going to fit in here. And again, I carried such guilt about that for years of giving this whole thing up and walking away. And then, 30, 40 years later, some psych person says, well, of course you would have been overwhelmed. Why did they let you choose that? And I thought, who they? I was doing the picking and I was doing it because it was the fanciest. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be good. I had no idea how ill-equipped I was or what shame I felt. I mean, oh, I was, it was a rude awakening. But it's part of the plan. We're taught as we go along. We can remember the lessons as we go along, even if they're a long time ago. I think it's important for me to remember things.
Well, it's also, I think, important to remember that it may not always turn out the way we expect or the way we think it should go.
Right.
Because, like with the military, if they say you're going to Panama, you're going to Panama. And okay, now how do we get the family there? And it just, there's a lot of things that when you read or have like the fellowship behind a lot of this, that you can piece together. It's just in the hardship of times, you think you know how it should work out. And it's hard to remember that it will and have that faith and yet taking a big deep breath and saying that just helps.
Mm.
Anything else on the money paragraph? If not, Janet, would you read us number 31?
Okay. Um, as men come into consciousness of the universal law, they will give in love and receive in love, and everybody will be satisfied with that method of keeping the law. Instead of considering money as a cold, hard material thing, see it as a formed substance, the symbol of the inexhaustible idea of substance, and the means that men are using to keep the divine law of giving and receiving. Money is not to be hoarded, but is to be kept moving. All who understand true prosperity keep the law of giving and receiving. All who take the right attitude toward money have plenty of it. It flows into their hands in a constant stream of blessing. They know that it is formed substance, the symbol of the inexhaustible idea of substance, and they come to understand and use money wisely as a medium of exchange. And we had one reading, number 7. Money is not to be hoarded, but is to be kept moving. Spiritual circulation is the inner stream of life, substance and intelligence flowing freely through the entire being.
Thanks, Janet. Thoughts?
One great thing about getting older is I care less about accumulating stuff, and I don't want trinkets. It's just like, it's more stuff I'm going to have to get rid of. So I think in my 30s and 40s, I was more interested in accumulating, and it's nice to get past that stage.
Amen.
Amen.
I think we're all reaching that stage.
I'm going to a 70th birthday party later on today, and it's like, what do you give somebody who's 70? Well, how about like a poem or something like that rather than a thing? Because when you're, like you said, Della, when you're 70, you have so many things
Well, for my recent 90th birthday, I asked for fun cards and I got a whopping load of them, and I've been laughing at them ever since.
There you go. So you got
Something
humor for your
Yeah,
birthday.
that's what
Yeah.
I wanted.
Well, we also gave you cookies.
Well, that's right. Claudia gave me a second birthday party, and she asked, because my favorite dessert is oatmeal cookies. So she asked everybody to bake me cookies.
Oh,
Your
that's
favorite
great.
dessert is cookies, period. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
so
that's
something
riches.
perishable. So the answer is something perishable always.
Right.
I love the
yeah,
idea of laughter, of giving, because you're giving people a strong suggestion, and then they can put their energy and love into that, and then it turns around and gives you the laughter and humor that you need, and so everybody is enjoying the moment as well as you being able to celebrate.
right.
I bet you Sandy went through this growing up that every time you were reposted, a lot of stuff had to stay behind or be given away. Like it's always downsizing. This is what I know from two military friends I have, that
Yep.
she's not worried about being old and went through what I went. We all helped with what I went through to downsize. And I said, "Do you worry about this?" And she said, "No." She said, "We've been offloading stuff for 40 years." And she said, she said, "You just felt better to have." I'm big on books, and there was always like hundreds of books that had to be packed and moved. And it was exhausting. The downsizing was the hardest material type thing I've ever done, I think, because it was so much stuff that seemed so important at the time it was acquired was now going out to Goodwill or to somebody who I knew wouldn't even use it. And I thought, God is with me. I'm going to know where to put, certain things. And it did all work out. But I felt such relief because now I can say there can be no gifts. Where I live is too small for any one thing. I can't have one more thing. And that reality slows people down. If I still lived in a big house, I could be 200 years old and crawling around a big house, and people would still bring you stuff because they want to give you something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And but they finally don't do it anymore just because I say, "You do know I'm going to regift this because there's no place for me to put it." And but it surely has been a very educational phase of life. And if you learned it when you were in your 40s or 50s, when you were still acquiring the stuff, you'd maybe not do that so much. But it's a hard thing to explain.
No, I agree. Sometimes my parents would just give me two boxes, and that's all. I pack two boxes, and that's all I get. And it's because, we had three kids and two adults, and they were allowed a certain weight limit or something to
Yeah.
do the move. And my mom moved us into a very small apartment when my dad was in Vietnam. And it was like just looking at the boxes and trying to figure it out. What do I value so much that I need to put in those two boxes? And then a couple of times they would lose things. And
Yeah.
I would realize that was like my one important box. That's where my cassette tapes were, or
Yeah.
and I knew I could replace them, but what was odd was that I had to grieve and mourn the loss of like the one box or something. But there's also something to it about then the joy of giving people, like Lillian suggesting, funny cards, because you wouldn't go to the store and buy that for yourself. You might read a couple, but to be able to give them a way to enrich her birthday and be involved in her birthday. And I bet you there might have been a little, frustration on their part. Which one is going to make her laugh? And yet it brings the joy, and that was really what was the fun side of it. And again, it's like I think Della said, it's a perishable. It's something that she doesn't have to save the cards, and she can read them and remember the jokes and remember the little cartoons or whatever's on them. And they come out with some good ones now, I bet, Lillian, right?
Yeah.
All this talk about stuff reminds me of I think George Carlin did a routine about stuff. And what I remember of the routine is that um, we have so much stuff that we now build separate facilities for putting all the stuff that we don't have room for in our houses.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, he's right.
Mhm.
Like, on the other hand, how much of the stuff that we accumulate is a substitute for security and a substitute for feeling okay? Because we don't really get the insight that we're being taught here is that the substance is infinite, universal, always available. We didn't always have the lessons that Sandy got to get as a kid, that even when you lose one of your two boxes, you're still going to get what you need, as your dad would say.
Mhm.
And so it's a sign to me of what we still have the opportunity to learn about ourselves and God. I also like this idea he talked about, instead of considering money as a cold hard material thing, see it as formed substance. I remember working with a friend, and I was working on my own prosperity consciousness, and this was a friend, a gentleman who was just prosperous. I mean, he was the kind of guy that whatever he touched turned into money, and he wasn't even trying to make money. He just had a consciousness. And I said to him, "Would you be willing to be my prosperity coach?" And he said, "Yeah." And I'll never forget the first thing he said. "What I want you to do is to always carry around $100 bill in your pocket." And I still carry $100 bills in my pocket.
And does it work?
I'm prosperous. It's again, it's not about the money, but it's what here, it's formed substance. It's a symbol. So it's a symbol. What does he say here? The symbol of the inexhaustible idea of substance. So his insight was it's about thinking.
Yes.
You
It's
feel prosperous if you got $100
exactly,
away. You feel it, and that's the relevant point about manifestation is feeling.
exactly.
I'd like to hear examples from people of um, money flow where they've either experienced or been generous about money, kind of like Sandy's comment that her father left them enough money to be able to help this other woman. More stories like that are kind of nice because that's what these two paragraphs are really about. Not even about stuff, but about flow of money for good.
Well, you've heard me say this before, but I'd like to speak to studies that they're doing now on the brain and when you give. And so when they wire people up and then they tell them to go give something. They might give them money to go give somebody. They might give them, cookies. It doesn't matter. They give a control group something to give, and they can randomly give it. And then they tell other people to observe those people giving, and they tell other people to just go about their business and don't do anything. And when they bring those people back and they wire them up and they ask them to remember their emotions, the people who gave had really high endorphins and good mojo going on in their brain, serotonin, etc. The people who observed had good serotonin and going on because you're observing acts of gratitude or kindness or whatever. And then the people who just went about their business just had normal brainwaves. So, they're really showing that giving, whether it's of your time or money or whatever you give randomly or in a focused way, serves the individual who's giving, and sometimes in a greater way than the person who's receiving. So I love, I know I've said this before, I sound like a broken record. I love when science factually has data that shows what we know to be true. It just reinforces it for me.
Interesting, huh?
So the other day I saw this, I was leaving a grand jury meeting, and it was about 7:30 at night, and I saw this woman standing on the levee, clearly homeless. And so I stopped, I pulled over, and I gave her $10, which I thought was pretty generous of me. I felt pretty good about it. $10 is, not a dollar. And she looked at me and she said, "So what do you want me to do with this?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, and I mean, I looked at her closer and she had this huge black eye. I said, "I don't know, maybe get yourself some health care, get a meal. Um, I don't know. I don't really care what you do with it. No strings attached. Just do something for yourself." But it was a kind of an interesting experience because maybe my expectation was gratitude, but there wasn't any there. Earlier that day, I had given $10 to a man, his wife, and two children in the parking lot at Bel Air. I was just like, first of all, I was a little judgy because I was like, what are you doing out here with these two kids? They should be in school. And then I went and got my prescription, came back out and thought, well, that's not kind. So I stopped my car around the corner. I went back, handed in the money. They were very grateful. And I said, "I just want you to know that this isn't going to last. This too shall pass. You're going to be okay." And they were like really appreciative. I think not just because of the words, but not just because of the money, but because I saw them and I offered them words that say, "I see you, and this isn't going to be forever. It's just right now. But it's going to get better." So it was kind of a weird day, you know, this the morning experience probably formatted my evening experience, and my evening experience was kind of a balancing act of, well, okay, Claudia, just because you should give because you want to give, not because you expect anything in return, which is an important lesson.
Many
Because you
years,
did your part by the giving, right? It's the giving. It's not in it's
It
not
is,
in anything else, right? It's just the idea of moving it by giving it out.
well, yes, but I'm also saying be careful of one's intention, because if I'm giving just to be giving, that's wonderful. If I'm giving with judgment, that's not so good. If I'm giving with an expectation of, thankfulness, that's not so good either. So, yes, absolutely, Janet, it's the giving. But what is in your consciousness when you're giving? I think I did a much better job with the family than I did with the gal. Good lesson to, it was a good day. It was a good day to learn lessons.
many years ago when I lived in San Francisco, there was a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. His name was John Carroll, and he had this annual Christmas column, which he called The Untied Way, which is a play on the United Way. So he got The Untied Way, and he said this is a private charity that you can you can participate in, and there's no middleman. You're not sending money to any group who's going to redistribute. Here's what you do. You go to an ATM and you take out as many $20 bills as you can afford. And then you go to a place in town where there's homeless and you give out the $20 bills until you're done.
Wow.
And he said some people will yell at you and curse you, and some people will take that money and buy drugs, and some people will take that money and buy alcohol, and some people will take that money and be grateful. And it's not about anybody's response. It's really about learning generosity. And so I do the untied way when I come up to a light and there's people standing outside asking for money. Here's a 20. And it's just about practicing generosity. It's like we have no idea what people are going to do with that money. And John's point was it's none of our business. If we're going to be generous, then give the money away. Don't worry about it.
That's good to hear, Marty, because I think we often, and maybe I often think, well, I wonder what they're going to do with this, you know?
Sure. I mean, that's very human. And as Claudia was saying in her share, I mean, we're human, so we have judgmental thoughts and, why the hell don't people conform to the way I would do things? Wouldn't the world be better off?
And we have expectations too.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But what the lesson is that we can notice these things and then decide whether we want to follow them. He
Yeah.
says here, all who understand true prosperity keep the law of giving and receiving. All who take the right attitude toward money have plenty of it. It flows, this is what Della was saying, it flows into their hands in a constant stream of blessing. They know that it is formed substance, the symbol of the inexhaustible idea of substance, and they come to understand and use money wisely as a medium of exchange. So it's like trusting that we're in the flow.
Good lesson.
How many people here ever took the 4T course at Christ Unity besides me?
Well, you taught it.
Yeah, good memory. But one of the things about 4T was the the belief, and we were promised at the beginning of this class. So 4T was tithing, time, treasure, and talent. And we were promised at the beginning of the course that we would have money coming back to us because we agreed to tithe during the 12 weeks of the course. And the promise was that we would get money back in greater amounts than what we were tithing. Or we would get our money back. It was a money back guarantee. And damn if that process doesn't work. And it's like, in my mind's like, well, where's that money going to come from? I don't know. It's like, and then people would report things like, I got a check in the mail from somebody that I lent money to 10 years ago. I forgot all about it. And the person decided that he or she could now pay it back. And it was things like that were, um, it's like, is that stimulated by a prosperity consciousness? Why did the person decide to pay back the money at this particular time? But it's that focus on the flow and the willingness to trust it, and that it goes all the way back to what Sandy was saying. That's what she learned from her father before you even had this particular terminology. It's like you just knew it.
I'm reading the book Into the Magic Shop by Dr. James Doty, Doty. He's a neurosurgeon at Stanford. And he did a podcast. He was on a podcast, and the name of the podcast that he was on, that the title of his talk on the podcast was Manifestation Without the Woo Woo. And I might have mentioned it here before, but he's all about well, he learned this when he was a young boy, poverty stricken, home with a drunken father, depressed mother, always getting evicted. And at 10 years old, he walked into a magic shop and was taught by the owner's mother how to manifest. And it's basic unity 101. Hold the thoughts in mind, imbue them with emotion, practice it over and over again, this consciousness of whatever it is you want to manifest. And of course, it's, that we call it prosperity. And so he, as this poor child, became got a college scholarship, became a physician. But on his list, when he was 10 years old, he wanted to have a big house a mansion on the ocean, have a Porsche, have a Rolex watch studded with diamonds, and become a doctor. And all those things manifested for him, but he explains it in his podcast or his book. It's just the mind. The brain cannot help, the mind cannot help, in conjunction with the brain, seek out that which you are calling for. But most of us don't call for those things. And he talked about how he would worry about getting evicted, and then he'd have to remind himself, no, I gotta see my parents getting a job. Anyway, it's a good book. It's called Into the Magic Shop, and it's just probably just a good reminder in a different way of what we know to be true.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to another topic here. Oh, wait a minute. We've been talking about this. Prosperity and giving. Who would read paragraph 30? Well, it's just a long paragraph, including this Fillmore quote.
I will. That's a great one. I love this one.
Okay.
When you give to another or do prosperity and giving, when you give to another or do something for them, why should you trust divine law for recompense other than expect compensation from them? This is a really good one, because I will just own up. I expect thank you notes. In the matter of giving, it is well to remember that the law of giving and receiving is universal and not personal. You should not be disappointed if those to whom you give do not recompense you, and you should not be anxious because you feel that you cannot give to those who do something for you. The law will take care of all that. The unchangeable law is give and it shall be given unto you. Luke 6:38. The exact way in which the return shall come is not specified. If you serve your neighbor, it may be that the most direct way for you to receive will be for him to do something for another. We may not try to fix the avenues through which our good is to come. There's no reason for thinking that what you give will come back through the one to whom you give it. The law will bring each of us just what it is owed, then reaping of the seeds we have sown. The return will come, for it cannot escape the law, though it may quite possibly come through a very different channel from what we expect. Trying to fix the channel through which his good must come to him is one of the ways in which the personal man shuts off his own supply.
Ooh.
The spiritual-minded man does not make selfish use of the law, but gives because he loves to give. Because he gives with no thought of reward and no other motive than love, he is thrown more completely into the inevitable operation of the law, and his return is all the more certain. He is inevitably enriched and cannot escape it. And footnote 1 is law. Metaphysically, a divine law or law of God is the orderly working out of the principal being or the divine ideas into expression and manifestation through creation. As used here, the law creates a flow of good. See the next annotation to understand why the flow will come to the giver, perhaps from a different channel. Recompense. Metaphysically, recompense is the satisfaction and uplift that one feels after a realization of truth. This uplift radiates from the giver a force of attraction. I like to think of this basic law of prosperity as radiation and attraction. That which you radiate outward in your thoughts, feelings, mental pictures, and words, you attract into your life and affairs.
Thanks for reading it. Any thoughts or comments?
I love all that.
Anything in particular, Lillian?
Well, and just the fact that, don't expect a return thank you, but it's going to come somewhere.
Question.
Yeah, Leo.
Did any of you see the movie Pay It Forward?
Yes.
Yes.
That was a
Well,
classic.
whenever I do something for some people and they feel embarrassed, they say, how can we recompense you? I say, don't. Pay it forward.
Good
And
idea.
that closes the issue. I say that can be 30 years from now that you feel like me. And then help someone, whatever. Don't worry.
Right.
What I
That's
should have said
good
to
thought.
that. That's what I should have said to that young woman, Leo, when she said, well, what do you want me to do? And I should have just said, pay it forward. That would have been the perfect answer.
In our days of technology, the ability to pay somebody's bridge toll behind you has changed because now it's tracking your license plate or a fast track. So even that's spontaneous. It's like you can hardly pay for somebody's gas because you don't know how much it's going to be. They aren't in line with coffee. I mean, sometimes you can be at the AM PM and pay for their coffee, but it's just, or if you're at a fast food place, you don't know what they're getting. So it's an interesting mechanism that's changed because of technology and our ability to pay it forward.
I always wanted to work in a coffee shop and be able to give people free food and be the person own the coffee shop, not be an employee, but be able to be behind the counter in an apron doing some work and then see someone that didn't have any money and give them a nice plate of food. And I thought, now that's a great way to have a job. And unfortunately, I think the day has passed when I could navigate being behind the counter at a coffee shop. But the idea of it still, it makes me happy because I think of all the money that I've thrown out there because I thought I was supposed to, or I should, or I worried somebody was keeping track. And that has been lifted in recent years. And as I look at the list of the people that I would ordinarily be giving to people and, places, whatever, I think, is this making me feel good inside to write this check and do this, or am I going to feel stupid? And if it comes back, yeah, no, don't do this. Let it go. And I have really cut way back because it's since finding this metaphysical stuff, I thought this is supposed to not feel like a duty, and it's not supposed to feel like I'm asking. It isn't even that you're asking for something in return, but that somehow I've paid some kind of karmic debt by sending you, money. And kids and birthdays, there had to be a cutoff. There just did. I thought this guy's going to be 35 and I'm going to be sending him money on his birthday.
Oh,
This has got to stop. And it just killed me that first year when I missed. And then till I got used to it, I was contacting their mothers and saying, I'm on a fixed income now. I'm going to kind of step back on this birthday stuff. She said, oh my God, Janet, he's 35. She said, I think you should have done it a long time ago. I think, okay. So learning comes when it comes. And it's really been funny to talk about this today because I've really had a lot of weird phases of what I thought was my job or what God expected of me. And it was
well,
all kind of
Janet, you must have been getting recompensed for all those years of giving in some way.
no, you'd get the mother calling up and saying, I hope you heard from Brady. And I'd say, no, I didn't. She'd say, oh, well, I'll thank you. I know you're always so generous. And I don't think this is how it works. But, those children were not taught as little kids to be thankful.
But I mean, was some other gift coming to you somehow in your life?
So much has come to me in so many ways all the time. But that kind of had a trick aspect to it that once I kind of believe, well, if you give it out, it'll come back. Maybe was that an Emmett Fox thing? Somehow I kind of known this for a long time. If you're not stingy and you give out, it's going to come around and come back. And
And
I
it
don't know that I really understood the concept. So,
I think Gail had something to say.
Just a thought. The sentence, there's no reason of thinking that what you give will come back through the one to whom you give it. I thought about my great grandfather who lived until I think he died 5 days before my 13th birthday. And things that I saw him do in terms of giving, he never lived long enough to see anything that I do in terms of giving, but the law goes on. And I think about now my grandson, he was in a pinch and he needed something. And I fortunately was able to help him, and he was just so grateful. And I remember saying to him, to God be the glory, what a blessing it is. And I was able to talk to him about my great grandfather and how that is now reaching him. So I was really struck by the fact that the law just goes on, it works. And
good.
and continue to do.
It's like this line here, Gail, the return will come, for it cannot escape the law. Though it might possibly come through a very different channel from what we expect.
However, I'm with Janet on, and I said it to begin with too. If I don't get a thank you note, I don't expect $100 gift card because I gave $100 gift card. But I do expect a thank you note. So if that kid can't acknowledge that it was valued, then I'm just going to move on and not hold resentment the next time I give and don't get a thank you note. But really, I also think that the sadness of not teaching your kids how to say thank you is that's the whole continuation of gratitude. And when you acknowledge and say thank you, that's telling the universe, hooray, I want more of this. Thank you. So yeah.
Claudia had a great lesson for her kids. If you gave them money or a gift, they couldn't use either one unless they sent a thank you note.
Yeah. And to this day, my kids write great thank you notes.
They are.
They do, because they put thought in it. But it's like, hey, somebody took the time to give you that. You don't get to play with it until you acknowledge, the graciousness and the grace that they gave to you. So,
and they would write little notes. This was in the
Yes.
days before email and all that stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
they still do.
and
That's sweet.
they still write cards. They usually don't do thank yous in email.
That's sweet. And of course, I was vilified the other day by my children telling me, do you remember when you took us to the Five and Dime and you told us to pick out presents for this person and that person because it was the right thing to do to give and not keep making lists about what you wanted from Santa Claus? It was more drawn out than that. But I said, well, vaguely, I said, what's wrong with that? You should be taught how to give up to other people. Well, I don't know. It just seems so weird. And I was like, yeah, okay, keep coming. It's just interesting. Families are different. And I've never gotten a written thank you note from any offspring or offspring of any of my biological relatives. I don't think they even know what that means. I don't think they know about stamps. I just, it's how you're raised, I think. And I believe in the written word, and getting something in the mail means a lot to me. And it's so rare nowadays because everyone's just shooting you an email.
Well, we're talking about the law of circulation here, and I think all of that is evidence of its the way it works. And but we've come to the end of our time together, so we're going to leave it there and pick it up in the same place next week. And thank everybody for participating. And let's close with reciting the prayer for protection together. The light
light
of God
God
surrounds us.
surrounds us.
Surrounds
The
us.
love
love
of
of
God
God
enfolds us.
Holds us.
The power of God
Power of
protects
God
us.
protects
The
The
us.
presence of God
presence of
Of
God
watches
God
over us
over us.
over us.
wherever we are.
Where we are.
God,
God is,
God is.
and
all
all
is
is
well.
well. Thank you, Marty.
Thanks,
thank you, Marty.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Marty.
Thank
So,
you, everyone.
Mark,
Have a nice, cool
Love
week.
seeing you
have a
all.
prosperous week.
Exactly.
Yes. Think of the circulation.
See you next
Yep.
week.
Thank you,
Back at you.
everyone.
Bye.